Everyone, and welcome to our special council meeting on November 17th, 2025, starting at 6:30 p.m. I would look for a mover and a seconder to call the meeting to order. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. We're going to go into a closed session to be held on November 17th at 6:30 p.m. in accordance with Section 239(2)(b) of the Municipal Act to consider the following: Prime Minister's Path Community Steering Committee. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favour? That carries unanimously, and we will reconvene at approximately 7 p.m. and open. in session, moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. Thank you to everyone who's joined us in the gallery this evening as well as online. I will turn it over to Councillor Martin for our land acknowledgement, please.
We've gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations between the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor. We do have a number of additions to the agenda which have been circulated both online and to Council. So I would be looking for an adoption to the agenda as amended, moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest under the Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I do have one not of pecuniary but of personal conflict of interest on item 14, which is business arising from closed. So at that point, I will turn it over to Councillor Cressman as acting mayor. This evening, we have no general interest delegations. There are two specific interest delegations who are addressing us this evening, and I'm not going to go over the rules as I know you guys are familiar with them. But just a reminder to those in the gallery, please no conversations in the gallery as noise carries a lot through here. If you do need to have a conversation, if you could just walk out to the main reception area so that everyone in here can continue to hear the proceedings. We do have correspondence that has been received. Would anybody like to pull any correspondence items? Okay, seeing none. We will move right into the report. First, to get it on the floor, it's a motion that this report on the new township official plan be received for information. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will now invite our Acting Director of Development Services, Andrew Martin, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor Solomon. So I'm going to keep my comments brief and actually turn this over to other very capable staff in our meeting tonight. First of all, I just wanted to introduce Rachel Green. Rachel joined the Development Services team in May of this year. She'll be taking the lead on the staff report tonight, and she's been pretty instrumental in working through the beginnings of our OP process and has been a tremendous addition to our staff team, so we really appreciate her attendance here tonight. And then our lead consultants from Nethery Planning, Joe Nethery and Michelle Diplock will be taking the presentation after Rachel provides some introductory comments, and then all of us will be here to attend any questions that you may have. So I'll turn that over to Rachel now.
Thank you. Good evening, Council and members of the public. Thank you for being here this evening. Tonight's special council meeting required under the Planning Act will introduce the project, share progress of the work completed to date, and provide another opportunity for public feedback to help shape policy directions before we begin the next phase of the project. The official plan sets the long-term vision for growth and provides a framework to guide land use decisions on where and how we will grow. It will ultimately be implemented through the Township zoning bylaw and other planning processes. As regional planning responsibility has been downloaded to the Township, the new official plan will replace the current Township's official plan and regional official plan with one document. The new plan will ensure alignment with recent provincial legislative updates and guide growth to the year 2051. The plan is being developed in 4 phases with ongoing community engagement throughout the process. And this work, as Andrew said, has been led by Nethery Planning and their multidisciplinary project team. They will provide a presentation on the 4 phases of the project, what we've heard so far through our different engagement sessions and workshops, an overview of the background studies and next steps in the process. So thank you again for everyone joining us. Your input is essential in shaping Wilmot's future, and I'll pass it over to Joe from Nethery Planning.
Thank you, Ms. Green, for the lovely introduction. Good evening, Mayor Salin, members of council. Thrilled to be in front of you in a formal environment like this for the first time on this project. And the beauty part of Ms. Green's lovely introduction is that that's going to allow me to whip through a number of my slides very quickly, so I can introduce my colleague and principal planner Michelle Diplock to update council and the public here and watching at home about some of our preliminary policy directions at this point. So the purpose of this special meeting of council, in case you're hearing any of us planners talk about Section 26 meetings under the Planning Act, is this is to meet that requirement under the Planning Act to hold a special meeting like this in order to, amongst other items, formally introduce this project to you, inform the public stakeholders yourselves about our work to date, what it is that we are working on, trying to achieve with this project, and to receive any information that may, from members of the public that may be relevant to completing this project, and of course to solicit and have that forum to receive any feedback or input on the work that has been completed to date. In terms of what the official plan is itself, again at the risk of not wanting to be duplicative, this is a very important and critical piece of land use planning policy that is intended to set up long-term growth management vision for the township. All municipalities in Ontario are required to have one of these, and I think it's very important that a municipality has content that reflects what it is looking for in how to achieve that go-forward vision itself. It will outline a series of goals and objectives in a number of areas, governing as many aspects of the land use planning framework as we can, with of course a very critical requirement under the Planning Act that any development and public works that are undertaken in the township and bylaws that are passed need to conform to this document. So we are setting up a very important and foundational piece to govern these works in the township going forward. In terms of why we need why this project, why at this time, versions of this slide has appeared in all of our public presentations and engagement points up to this point tonight in this project. So your current document was approved in 2004. There have been a series of amendments, including a major one in 2017 with approval in 2019. But it is at that point getting to that point of what we might call end of life on that particular document itself. Now, coupled with all of this, there have been a series of major legislative and policy changes, even since 2019, that affect the township and, again, all municipalities across Ontario. We have, since that time, 2 new provincial planning statements, policy statement in 2020 and our current one from 2024. The repeal of the growth plan, the elimination of land use planning responsibilities from Waterloo Region and other upper tier municipalities across Ontario as well, who are also grappling with this transition and this change that has been set about by the province, all of which effectively requiring those local planning documents to be up to date and consistent with that provincial policy, and to reflect the challenge that has been foisted upon you in that you now have 2 official plans that you're currently implementing and administering, the region's document and your own current township document. There is a basic administrative housekeeping sort of item to this in that, do you need 2 plans when one will do? And of course, what content will that one contain? Updating the official plan, of course, while ensuring that it's responsive to your current trends, current challenges, current issues that you are facing. There is also a requirement and an expectation through provincial legislation that it is planning for the minimum growth population targets that have been approved through the regional process. And it's important that we're bringing the document and its future vision into consistency with those numbers. This keeps you clean and intact with those provincial expectations. Again, touching on those existing policy inputs, this project isn't necessarily about what I think or what Mr. Martin might think, Ms. Green might think. We are taking a look at the policy framework that exists at this time. We assess those and in order to provide that direction in the local planning document itself. I've been pretty consistent, I think, in my messaging so far that there are a number of elements in the region's official plan, most recently consolidated in 2024 as a part of that eventual transition down to the 7 local municipalities in Waterloo Region, that there are many of those elements were already in the township's current official plan. The township has already provided a considerable amount of leadership in some of these areas, in some of these points, and that we have been hearing from the public as well on a number of these points and the importance of them as we go forward. Ms. Green did a pretty great job of summarizing our 4-phase project. We are effectively coming to the end tonight of our 2nd phase of work, completing these background technical studies, completing the Section 26 meeting as well. We have some documentation that we're obviously going to be finalizing as a part of completing this milestone tonight before we lock ourselves down in a room and we get busy writing. We'll be entering phase 3 of this project, drafting the draft official plan itself, the new mapping that will go along with it as well, for the full range of those policy matters that need to be addressed. While that is a little bit of a quiet phase from what you have seen from us as a project team from staff over the past several months, we will be busy, and once that is complete, we are back out to conclude phase 3 with another round of public engagement in a diverse range of formats and functions. We remain on track to meet the township's target deadline of completing this work at the end of spring in 2026. We have been out repeatedly. We had very early feedback ongoing in this project to ensure that we were hitting all of the important stakeholder engagement points of being out in the public and being present. Here we are tonight at the special meeting of council that's introducing this project, although we've had a number of conversations with people here and of course with the faces behind me as well too. But we have been having those one-on-one conversations individually with yourselves, with over 35, I believe, members of the public who signed up for our one-on-one engagements that day. We have been meeting with Indigenous governments and nations who expressed an interest in being a part of this conversation as well. And we will be continuing those conversations. We actually have a new hit point in the month of December where a number of local schools have taken us up on our offer to come in and do a workshop with the individual students themselves, making Mrs. Nethery and Mr. Nethery, my brother, very happy that, yeah, I can do this teaching stuff every so often, just keep it, 2 days a year sort of a thing. Once that draft content itself, I don't think they're watching tonight either, though. We'll be back out then in the spring once the full document is done for another fulsome round of consultation, where we do anticipate that strong trend that we have been observing so far, with significant interest in this township, in this municipality, in what this document is going to say and what content it's going to continue with. We see no signs of slowing down, and that is a great thing that the township should be proud of, that everybody cares so much about what this is going to say and how it's all fundamentally going to look. In and amongst some of those highlights, we were out at the Fall Fair, that lovely weekend in September, in order to gather some early inputs on some of those important keywords that we might want to consider in what a go-forward plan looks like in this township. In September the 23rd, a lovely evening workshop at what is now my favorite rural venue, the New Dundee Community Centre, to undertake a similar workshop, very detailed and focused, evolving and emerging out of what we had heard on September 13th. And then back at the main arena in the community centre itself in the middle of October, to start looking a little bit further, deeper in that sense as well. At each stage, at each of these interactions, the content gets a little bigger, the content gets a little more focused, and becomes a little bit closer to what the draft content itself would look like. And so we have all been building to this sort of a milestone event tonight here. We do have in the discussion papers posted on the Engage Wilmot, on the project's webpage through Engage Wilmot, a number of preliminary principles across a full range of technical studies, which Ms. Diplock behind me will get to summarizing shortly. But we have heard about encouraging and supporting the right range and mix of housing types and in the right locations where those matter as well. We are looking to enhance those individual village centers themselves by ensuring the existing development and buildings that are there can accommodate those new buildings, that any new housing or community facilities can serve to enhance those community features, those community areas themselves rather, with the right servicing solutions tied to them. We want to ensure that the official plan is providing for local jobs and economic growth. We've heard very strongly about the importance of that in the township, that those options exist, that this isn't just a pure suburb itself. We want to ensure, and as a part of that, we need to ensure that the right transportation options are provided, that we're supporting the safe movement of people and goods, providing that choice on the local roads themselves, and ensuring whatever regional directions are appropriately recognized as well. We are here to ensure, as provincial policy dictates, that we are providing for the protection and enhancement of your natural heritage system, of its core ecological functions, and having the policy basis to ensure that that continues forward as the current plan does at this time too. We are looking to do what we can to promote fiscal responsibility in that development as well, that growth is being managed in tandem with the availability of services, which is more than just pipes and pavement, that the appropriate features and amenities are coming along to support that as well too. And as expected through provincial policy as well, that those communities that are being designed are resilient, they support sustainability long-term and going forward, which includes providing for the support for the right compact urban form, and obviously helping to deliver on one of the items that we've heard very strongly about in our early engagement, which is for the protection of farmland as well, and the township's rural identity. So I'll be quickly introducing what the background studies are before, again, Ms. Diplock gets deeper into the content on this. The background studies are background reports, discussion papers, whatever framing one happens to choose, but we are using background studies here. And we have done the deep research, assessment of legislative changes, provincial policy, the local context, the feedback that has been received in order to produce the papers that they are in their current state. Basically, it's our lay of the land, coming in with the context that we are bringing in as a project team, informed by our project engineers, our ecologists, our urban designers who are supporting on this project, to ensure that the key items and issues that we have heard are being addressed with some preliminary suggestions. I suggest we're probably going to hear some feedback from a number of attendees tonight on what some of those items are, which is a really great, which is very important and a key part of tonight to make sure that we're hearing that input and we're bringing it in so it's considered through the project. But I think that's enough from me, and I'll turn it over. Michelle, do you want to keep my time? Okay. Page down. Sorry.
All right, so if we move on to the next slide, there are 7 background reports that have been completed as a part of this project. They include a housing needs report, an employment needs report, a commercial land needs assessment, as well as a transportation, water and wastewater servicing, as well as stormwater management and urban design reports. And I'm going to walk you through what we'd initially presented to the community. These reports have been refined based on community and public input that we had on our October 22nd meeting. And so these reports have now been published as final on the Township's Engage page, and so all of these reports can be found online there. The first is the Housing Needs Report. It identifies the requirements for growth in Wilmot, including current and projected needs and housing trends, some of the emerging policy directions that will be considered through the drafting of the official plan process include zoning land for flexibility to allow for multiple housing typologies and uses as of right, allowing for higher densities in village centers and main roads to support walkable mixed-use areas with amenities, and planning for a range of population growth targets with no additional land needs identified as part of that background report. Next slide. In terms of how we're projecting out the population for housing needs, at the beginning of the century, Wilmot's population growth was relatively high, but has since tapered off as servicing constraints have limited new growth. So there's been kind of a range of different options that we've considered through the background report. And so as part of the official plan process, Wilmot needs to consider planning for multiple growth scenarios. So we've mapped out 3 different population growth scenarios that are being considered as part of this project. And that we've identified through our background report that there is no additional land needs required for residential. Next slide. In terms of the employment needs, this report details the needs for employment lands based on projections from the provincial government. Some of the emerging policy directions for employment include providing for an employment target of at least 3,200 new jobs by 2051, protecting employment areas through compatibility policies, such as avoiding adverse impacts to sensitive land uses, and maintaining and updating an employment land inventory of available lots and sizes through expansion of between 26 and 95 hectares of new employment lands. In terms of the commercial needs study, this report identifies commercial needs based on population growth and the surrounding land uses. Some of these emerging policy directions include identifying new neighborhood commercial nodes when new neighborhoods are created, as Wilmot may require between 200,000 and 286,000 square feet of new residential space, retail space. As well as permitting a broad range of commercial uses such as food and grocery stores and merchandise through the process, as well as allowing small-scale uses, commercial uses in residential areas such as corner stores or at-home daycares. The transportation report looks at the township's current transportation network, including road and active transportation networks, and identifies opportunities to address growth. Some of the emerging policy directions from this report include improving traffic safety through traffic calming measures and public education, designing for an accessible all-season built form by utilizing tactile paving or audible signals, as well as creating a township road hierarchy plan to classify roads based on local character and land use contexts. The water and wastewater report looks at the requirements for existing services to support existing residents and growth. Some of the policy directions from that include introducing policy for servicing allocation system, which manages capacity constraints and life cycle planning, provides direction for rainwater collection and usage, and planning for the optimization of township and region water and wastewater infrastructure, including the appropriate phasing of development. Stormwater management really focused on protecting key natural hydrologic features and their buffers from development or site alteration, encouraging low-impact development to support rainwater infiltration and filtration, as well as prioritizing infrastructure design, location, and maintenance to mitigate against impacts of climate change and extreme weather. And the urban design report looked at protecting and expanding on the township's trail system and promoting active transportation, including policies that support conservation objectives, including water conservation and energy, and planning for compatible development, including gentle intensification where appropriate, and promoting sustainable design. So now I'll turn it back over to Joe to walk through the project next steps as we complete phase 1 and 2 of the project and what phase 3 will begin to look like.
So yes, as mentioned, we're through this really important meeting tonight, we're bringing closure to our effective first half of the project. It is time for us to get busy in drafting the new official plan itself. I am going to go back one slide if that's okay. Thanks. The importance of the Section 26 meeting itself tonight is to make sure that we are getting this feedback in about what we have put out so far through this project, what some of these preliminary ideas are. We have not started writing yet. There are going to be ideas up here that are not liked, whatever that spectrum happens to be. It's really important that we are getting this feedback in these forums, if we're getting it through the Engage Wilmot page itself, so we can consider this information as we go forward drafting the official plan itself. These conversations are good. They are essential to having success on this project, because we're obviously here to bring forward something that you, in 7 months, that you as a council can get behind, can see as good planning and in the public interest, and really defining of what this township's vision is going to be. And you know, it's obviously important we do a good job, because I got to keep doing this once this project is over. So any of this feedback is welcomed at any point. The next slide is slightly duplicative from earlier. We continue to be out with multiple public engagement points throughout this project. We are by no means done, even though this will be a quiet stage for the next little bit. And if this sort of meeting isn't necessarily the venue to deliver that feedback to us, the Township's page is online 24/7, including statutory public holidays, to receive your input, to subscribe, to be up to date on project updates as they are published and posted live. And failing that, I am sure that Township staff would always welcome that phone call and that correspondence in. We also have the dedicated project email. Copies of that are forwarded to me and my team as well, and we are reviewing them as well. So with that, I turn it back to you, Your Worship, to for any questions you council may have and to continue on with our evening.
Thank you very much, both Mr. Nethery and Ms. Diplock. Thank you for that presentation. Council, we will go to questions first, then we do have a registered delegate, and then we'll add in additional input or any items after we have that delegation come forward. So if we have questions right now, I'll go to Councillor Dunstall first.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And I'm not sure, Joe, if this is for you or Michelle, so I'll just put it out there. As one of the councillors for Ward 4, which has the largest population and business base, I'm concerned about how you're defining the term village centres. Unlike some of the other wards who just don't have the infrastructure to support housing growth, the burden always falls on either New Hamburg or Baden. So, and I've certainly heard from our constituents that the two top priorities are protecting the farmland, but also protecting the small feel and character of Wilmot. So any path forward has to navigate growth with both of those priorities in mind. But if we're discussing increased building height, which was discussed in the report, I need some clarity. What exactly do you consider a village centre, and which roads or areas are you referring to?
Through Your Worship, to the councillor, I don't have a particular map ready to go tonight that would be answering some of those, but so I would answer the question by closing my eyes and envisioning where those existing where some of those existing centres are. We have a historic core in New Hamburg itself. We have a lovely I'm going to call it a main street here in Baden, where there is I would say there is a historic concentration of some of these buildings and places and spaces that may form a logical centre in that sense. An option two is when new communities are being planned, and I'm thinking at a slightly larger scale, recognizing there are existing approvals in place, and that's not exactly something an official plan review is here to undo or unwind. Are there locations in those new communities that may lend themselves to potentially supporting some of those centre kinds of features? So I think, Councillor, I'm answering your question by talking about where we see some of that historic presence, or existing presence rather, of taller and tighter together.
Thank you.
And in a new application, are there logical options where that might look like, and what are some of the policies or criteria that would depend upon it?
So you don't actually have any locations that you have been considering as a village centre at this point?
I don't have, through Your Worship, to the councillor, I don't have a set one today. We're coming in seeking that feedback, and I think I need to consider this as the first bit of good feedback received tonight.
Thank you.
Right, we'll go to Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, to Joe, well, Mr. Netherly. I guess in terms of the background information, you indicated that you fold into this new official plan is the Waterloo Region official plan. And I'm thinking it has been referenced multiple times in this chamber about the recent formation of that, or I guess the planning document was put together fairly recently, and I guess what I'm looking at, what trumps, what is the document that rises to the top under the new legislation that the province passed. So is it the document of official plan of Wilmot that will be formed, or is there far-reaching effect of what the region of Waterloo's official plan as it reaches down through the years and impacts us for the next 50 years? So I'm trying to get a feeling for how much that has a bearing on our new official plan and how much it informs but may not trump. That's a card sense use of the word rather than a political sense of the word, our document.
Yes. And through you, Your Worship, I am trying to coach myself on saying superseding these days for the same reason. All my good talking points. Anyway, I think I'm going to answer that question by saying that the documents, plural, that would supersede and provide primary direction here are both the Planning Act and the Provincial Policy Statement. What you effectively have in the Township Official Plan 2019 and the Waterloo Regional Official Plan 2022, they are both now in your, being the corporation's, ownership and administration. So which of those two wins out? There is no hard and fast rule in this regard. And allow me, if I can ramble for a bit, allow me to use the example of density targets. So under the previous growth plan itself, there were minimum density levels, targets for what we call greenfield development is now growth in a designated growth area. The Waterloo Region Official Plan allocated those density targets to each of the 7 local municipalities. Township staff of the day and regional councillors at the time were all involved in that process. And it set certain minimums for what level of development that greenfield, those new subdivision projects should hit in Wilmot Township. The 2024 Provincial Planning Statement and amendments to the Planning Act have done away with that. And now those serious expectations are only on the 29 largest and fastest growing municipalities in Ontario. That's Kitchener, it's Waterloo, it's Cambridge, it's Hamilton, yay, it's my native Guelph. It's not the Township of Wilmot. So some of those expectations are now what the province is signaling is that could be a little different for you. So do some of those regional expectations still matter in this regard? That's a big and fundamental question that we as a project team need to grapple with. But again, you'll hear me say this many times, I have the easy job in terms of saying, well, this is what I think is good planning and what you should do. It is this council that has the tough decisions to decide what does that vision future forward looking like. And we're obviously going to do our part as a project team alongside staff to ensure we're giving you the best information to make the best decision you can. I hope that answers the question.
Any additional questions at this time, councillors? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, you've noted here as one of the pillars sort of looking at, and even some of the initial feedback here is looking at 6 to 8 story high buildings. I will share with you, you're probably the first person to tell me that that's what this town would want. I certainly have not heard that from the public. In sort of reading through your background work, or as a math teacher would say, show your work, and you've provided all the different areas of input here. And it's funny you just bring up density targets, because the developers mentioned here that should significant growth occur, and what should those buildings look like, and how do you compare that to regional density targets? But we're essentially doing away with those, right? And then there was only the one mention that I could find with the visioning workshops that sort of mentioned you want to have infill and intensification, but I'm not really seeing an overwhelming demand through all the methods of communication or data collection here to suggest that anybody wants 6 to 8 story high buildings. And I would contrast this by saying a lot of your work would support, we want continued small town feel, we want rural feel. I could envision a place where maybe there would be 3 story high buildings in Main Street areas, right? Maybe you've got 2 floors of residential and commercial on the bottom. So ultimately, I guess what I'm asking is, where are you getting this from? Like, what's informing you to say that we need to see these towers come up in our town? given that we're not tied to density targets anymore and that we're essentially going to set those. But at the same time, there's very little work to support that position. So where's that coming from?
Sure. So through you, Your Worship, to the Councillor, one quick clarification to say about regional density targets going away. What I am saying is that we need to have a discussion around some of those levels themselves. Is it that? I'm not ready to give any commitments. I'm using that as an example at this point. And I think it's an important conversation that we're going to have as a broader collective what that all means. Specific to the stories themselves, so in coming forward with a preliminary policy direction, on the understanding there is a line that we all will be balancing in terms of what we think is the right answers and the right suggestions. So I'm coming forward tonight suggesting this as a reasonable alternative in order to help ensure the right amount of units are being provided in the township settlement areas themselves, balancing that need for overall environmental, agricultural land protection as well. So part of being able to avoid needing residential land is by making an assumption, quite frankly, that there will have to be some going up in certain places. You're hearing me say I don't believe that is everywhere, that there's an appropriateness for that, and what would the return on that be? Which doesn't actually fully answer the question. So the official answer to your question, where is this coming from? We do have hits on that through public engagement. And I will fully disclose, as would Ms. Donna if she was here tonight, that the work that we do isn't statistically representative of what we hear and whatnot. It is certainly a segment. We do hear that as part of the team as well. Fundamentally, any of those items that come forward is based on my professional recommendation, our team's professional recommendation on what we think might work. So I commit to you and the corporation and the public here as well, that where we come forward with some of these recommendations where we may not like what we're hearing, I'm not the kind of player who would want to introduce that just clean slate, holus bolus, let's go. What is important if that building is going to happen? How does it look? How does it fit in with our community? How have we appropriately considered that? And ensuring the design is appropriate and sensitive itself. So the short version of that, Councillor, is we are hearing it. I'm also not about to say it's the majority of what we are hearing. We are definitely hearing low heights as well too. So in terms of being able to suggest, I think you can do a little bit taller in the right places, in the right context, is formed on like the balance of my professional opinion and considering those public inputs as well. And I think we have another good piece of feedback received as well on that initial suggestion.
Councillor Wilkinson for follow-up.
Thank you, through the chair. Okay. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I think ultimately, and I appreciate making professional recommendations, but I want to really make sure that we're framing this document in the right way. I'm not here to try and make decisions on the folks. I mean, we're discussing a document that will inform how this town will grow, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that it's representative of the people that live and pay taxes here. And I think for the most part, we're looking to see a relatively similar expansion within a certain set boundary. And my concern is that I'm also looking at this and thinking from the suggestion that if you're going to have higher density, you're going to have some of these buildings, that's maybe not growing the same way that the community that lives here and that actually is invested in here or in this town wants to see growth. And I would also suggest that we're probably tied to a specific limit based on our water and wastewater capacities. So I'm also reading through some of your background work, and there's suggestion there, like, well, you might want to consider future expansion. I'd be the first one to say I want no part of any future expansion of wastewater or water services out here. So I see it as sort of, we can get to a certain point in capacity, and that's it. Town's full, right? My concern is that with the development or with the proposal of some of these policies, are you suggesting professionally or potentially pushing us in a direction that might put us beyond what our current capacity is?
Through you, I'm just contemplating quietly, sorry. So through you, Your Worship, to the Councillor, We're actually really strongly aligned on that point. There are very real capacity constraints that exist in the water and wastewater, in particular wastewater system. The water and wastewater master planning work that is underway is probing some of those questions as well, to understand how is that the case. But without wanting to spend too much time probing those sorts of issues. The approvals that are effectively already in place, and some of those applications that are already in, are already pushing the township into that, I'm going to call it discomfort zone, whether that's the right framing or not. Ergo, we do have some big questions to answer as a part of this project. And that means if there is a provincial expectation of a minimum target of X that needs to be met, but my infrastructure currently says X minus a certain amount, what does bridging that gap look like, and who is that impacted, who is paying for that? We do have some big questions to grapple with as a part of this assignment, absolutely. And I don't have those full answers tonight, but we've got some work to do over the next couple of months in order to fully answer that in the preparation of that draft itself.
We'll go to Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I guess I would first ask the question, what is the purpose of our discussion now? Is it to ask questions of the report? I would have a different opinion than my colleague, Councillor Wilkinson, about the number of stories. We've already approved 6 stories in some developments. So I could debate that, but is now the time to do that? Or are we simply just asking questions of the consultant?
So I guess I didn't provide clarity on what avenue of questioning we could ask the consultant, but I'm more so looking for questions now and then debating if we can do after we have our delegates. So maybe if you have questions to help you understand if there's anything brought up that you didn't, but if you wanted to debate other concepts that have been brought up by councillors or by people in the community that you've heard, I would just ask that we do that debating after we have our delegations, if that makes sense. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I guess through you, Mayor, I would look at slide number 13 with the projection of various growth rates. And I think you alluded to it in your last response, is how some of these debates in terms of approving a subdivision, I can't take part of it because of pecuniary interest in my son's engineering firm that he's CEO of. But regardless, I guess I look at these different lines and it begs the question, how many lots have we already, or how many subdivisions have we already approved? And when are we going to hit well, it's not a glass ceiling, the ceiling, so to speak, in what is attainable, exactly what you said in terms of water and wastewater, because I hear that as a significant concern from residents who have met with me. So I think it's the balance of that and how we arrive at that. And so I would hope to see, here's the growth, but given what we've approved so far, here's the line. Here's the line that represents what our maximum capacity is in terms of water and wastewater. So that is going to determine, unless something dramatically happens, that's the growth figure that's going to be the one that we have to live. When I grew up, it was called living within your means. And so this is really speaking to that piece of looking at where what we have approved and what is doable. So that would, I hope I'm going to see something like that in your drafts so that it will inform us.
Councillor Sadhu?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if this is more so just a comment as a feedback to take back, but at the end of the day, it's all about balance. I want to acknowledge that families and people want to move to a rural township like ours because they want to have a little bit of space, they want to be able to breathe, have a bit of a yard, own a vehicle and commute in that vehicle. So we do understand that we do need to grow. That's something we need to do. It's just a matter of how we grow and how responsibly we do it. I just want to make sure we keep the focus on keeping it a small rural township and understanding that, yes, while density homes and housing is needed, do it in a way that complements the existing neighborhood as opposed to overpowering our current neighborhood. So that comes from stories not going 6, 7, 8 stories high, keeping it at a fairly reasonable level. And from what I've heard from residents in Baden especially is there is an appetite for, if you're going to do commercial or 2 or 3 stories high, keep it on the main road as far as the main stretch of Baden. And ultimately remember that people do move to a rural township because they want to get out of the city, they want to have some breathing room, they want to be able to go for walks, and sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but essentially that is the genesis of my comments, and the feedback is we need to find that balancing act, and we need to complement what is currently here and not take big city thinking and plug it into a small rural township, because that's just never going to jive.
Councillor Wilkinson again, and then if there are no other questions of a technical nature, I will call on our delegates.
Thank you. Through the chair, technical. The wastewater servicing background work that you'll be conducting and continuing to conduct, are you taking into account the already existing water and wastewater treatment studies that the region has done? And we've also seen reports from the Grand River Conservation Authority suggesting really how far you can push things, right? So I think from my understanding and my reading, we're essentially there. They have a plan. This is as far as we can go. Are you taking that into account? Like, has that been part of any of your reasoning or policy proposals?
So through your worship as a councillor, yes, or at least we're supposed to be. I'll do my best impression of Matt Fisher, our project and our project's engineer on this assignment, in that we know there's a certain amount of the plant that's being used. There are approvals that are already in the system, so we reserve some of that allocation, some of the space for those. And there is a real pure sort of mathematics to that. A plus B equals X, take away C equals capacity, and that's what is theoretically there. What it does not change is that the provincial planning statement also requires us to follow and establish a minimum target when it comes to both residents and jobs. We're allowed to use the most recently approved number that has some planning status. Put another way, the regional official plan minimum target that was assigned as the basis for one of those that's supportable under planning policy. I think we're getting some good feedback again tonight about how does all of this interplay with some of those larger items, which is good for us to be thinking about. But I return back to my initial answer, which is, yeah, council will have some very big questions that need to be answered as a part of this assignment that we're putting in front of you in a few months.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through Mayor. This is for Director Martin. You and I had this conversation, and actually one of my constituents is in the gallery that had contacted me, and I had more than 2 people contact me. And this has nothing to do with Michelle or Joe, because I don't believe that they were involved, but you and I have had a conversation about constituents that felt that they had not been heard at some of these sessions, or that they had been dismissed, or that their concerns and opinions had been dismissed. You had assured me that that had been addressed, so I just wanted to make sure that the people who had contacted me heard you say that that had been addressed with our consultants.
Through your Mayor Sondland, yeah, we did have that discussion your statement's accurate. We regrouped after some public information sessions just about how it was delivered, messaging. Certainly I had conversations with a number of individuals at those meetings and afterwards just to ensure that the message is clearly out, that we're looking and receiving comments from everyone. There were some redirects about some subject matter that isn't related to our official plan, which has caused some conflicts at those meetings, and that's something we've had discussions with. But again, those particular subject matters aren't within the scope of our official plan process, so that won't change. But certainly, I've met with the consulting team, when we deliver future public information sessions, just allowing flexibility for how people prefer to communicate, and those forums or those meetings are something that we will work out before we hold additional ones. And as I've communicated with a number of people, my email, my phone, my office is always open, and I'm happy to have conversations with anyone.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point in time? I did have a question, and because I'm not exactly looking for a definitive answer tonight, more so in understanding that as this proceeds, there will be discussion on it. And it's, how does our official plan play into our long-term budgeting? It is no surprise that Wilmot has found itself in some unique, or maybe not unique, but financial situations that is a reality that is a constraint on what we can invest in. And we also know that growth doesn't pay for itself, and we know that we have an infrastructure deficit like every other municipality in Ontario that, although the province is throwing some money at, not an adequate amount to address. So I also don't want to preface it with, I don't want us to be looking at growth, but how do we find that balance, and how does this document speak to how we can also finance and grow? One of my expectations, I guess, would be we do have KPMG on board, and one of their tasks is completing a solid 10-year capital plan, which I know some of these projects would feed into. But then my question is also on the regional side, as they obviously are responsible for our wastewater treatment, and then also looking in a bigger context now that there isn't a regional level official plan, when we're looking at big resources like the new hospital build, because that will hit our tax base as well. I'm just trying to understand how it'll kind of speak into those and the real budgetary constraints that we have, and then also the positives that come with growth, like the new tax base and employment. I know that has been mentioned many times in the report, but just wondering how that'll play into all of this.
Of course, Your Worship, and this may be a kind of question where staff may supplement what I'm going to attempt here. Because fundamentally, an official plan is not a fiscal tool in that sense. When you talk about a 10-year capital plan through KPMG, if you are really interested in long-term spending plans, those sorts of things, that's a great project to be involved in and to invest those energies in addition to your typical strategic your annual budgeting plans themselves. What we are doing here is identifying fundamentally land use permissions, infrastructure needs, requirements, how those should be designed. We would include some light enabling policy around how funding may work and what tools would be enabled to do that. But the simple virtue of approving the official, or adopting rather, an official plan itself doesn't necessarily bind or commit the corporation to any particular spending requirements, unless, of course, that's the feedback we get. Thou shalt build an arena on every corner. Yeah, we can do that policy for you. I don't think that's going to work fundamentally. So it all, I would tackle that question is, about just general good governance and those sorts of practices. We're here to ensure that the vision we think is achievable, it's realistic, that it meets those market expectations as well, in order to provide those best supports going forward. On the understanding that the question of if growth pays for growth, there are certain forms of residential growth that are more cost effective, or I said residential, growth in general, that is more cost effective and provides a better straight dollar return to a municipality than other forms do as well, such as the beauty, the joy, and the adventure of land use planning.
Okay. Could I maybe ask, and I appreciate what you're saying, I guess from my perspective, even the current new greenfield development that we have does require infrastructure that we have to pay to get to service those properties. That does in part come from development charges, but also depending on, as you know, what kind of development it is, there's been provincial changes to DCs. So I guess really one thing that this council, I think on a whole, has been looking at is fiscal responsibility. So I would hate to say, here's a plan that's really great planning practices, but it's not tied to our long-term financial planning. So then it's unrealistic, or we get to a scenario where a developer wants to develop something, we've said, yeah, no, that totally makes sense, but then we go, oh, sorry, we can't get you, you're servicing there. So I guess I'd like to see more alignment there. Could I maybe just ask, and maybe this would be more of an ask of staff, but in particular, because the one component KPMG is doing is that long-term financial forecasting in early next year, can we somehow align this plan? And I get it won't be perfect. I know it's more of an art form than a science, but can we have something there so that we aren't approving something that planning-wise sounds perfect, but then we come to the financial realities and it's not achievable? But I'll go to Director Martin.
Thank you for that question, Mayor Solomon. So a component of the work we are doing is looking at servicing needs analysis, and there is a light financial component to it. I use Mr. Nethery's comment. But what it does do is it identifies the projects and the priorities of what would need to happen to achieve those. So where does servicing infrastructure required? Where we don't have proper sizing in place? So it will identify those key projects and key items that will be required to support development. Road infrastructure, trail infrastructure, park amenities, those sorts of things will be identified. So it will help set the stage for how we identify those items in budgeting, in our development charge background studies, all those components that ultimately fund them. So the plan won't identify the specific funding or identify all of the numbers, but it will provide some light financial aspects and identify those components that need to be investigated and cost analysis occurring through those supporting documents. So it is embedded in there, what you're saying, components of it, and certainly we'll continue to have those conversations to make sure the outcome is aligned and ultimately to coordinate with ongoing work with our 10-year capital and development charge background studies.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll hold off on the debate part after our two delegates. Thank you very much at this point, Mr. Nethery, and I will invite up our first delegation for this evening, and that is Kevin Thomason. Kevin, thank you for joining us. You know the rules. You have 7 minutes, and we're happy you're here.
Honourable Mayor, councillors and guests, my name is Kevin Thomason, a longtime Wilmot resident and Vice Chair of the Grand River Environmental Network that has worked on official plans across the Grand River watershed for decades. We have been heavily involved in the development of regional official plans since the 1990s. And now, with the loss of regional planning authority, we need to ensure that everything contained in the regional official plan is now included in the Wilmot official plan. Official plans are the most important documents that most citizens will never read. They decide where and how we'll grow, what we will protect and what we will destroy, what we will build, how we will live, how we will get around, and so much more for decades. This Wilmot official plan is by far the most important decision and legacy you will make as councillors. It is unappealable and irrevocable, setting into motion development expectations, master plans, and so much about the future of our municipality and communities. We have to get this right, and we only have one chance. Back in 2004, facing rapid growth across the GTA, the Walkerton water crisis, and the need to better protect our environment, both myself and Regional Chair Ken Sealing appeared before standing committees at Queen's Park asking for inclusion in the provincial Greenbelt, a new visionary plan to protect headwaters, farmland, and environmentally sensitive features across millions of acres of Ontario. Unfortunately, while Waterloo was considered part of the GTA by some ministries and targeted for massive growth, we were considered outside the GTA and left out of the Greenbelt by other ministries. Thus, with the nightmarish scenario of getting the same massive growth but none of the protections as other parts of the GTA, the Region of Waterloo embarked on an ambitious plan to balance our growth and development, protect our farmland, and ensure our water supply for future generations with regional protections. The resulting 2009 Regional Official Plan was so visionary that every single word of it was appealed by a consortium of 26 developers for over 6 years. However, the region fought vigorously at the OMB, the OLT, and all the way to the Superior Court of Ontario, and acted as if everything was already in place. So, when in 2015 the plan was finally approved, we had already been enjoying its features for years. This included the creations of our visionary countryside line concept, designed to protect farmland and guide growth for generations. Our environmentally sensitive landscapes, protecting our most fragile areas, including parts of Wilmot. The protected countryside, a local version of the Greenbelt that was better and stronger, protecting the Waterloo Moraine and drinking water aquifers hundreds of thousands of residents, including much of Wilmot Township, is solely dependent on for all our water needs. And a focus on public transportation with the concept of Ion LRT that has transformed our cities of Kitchener and Waterloo, revitalizing decaying downtowns to the point where today the complaints are about applications for too many 50-story buildings. So many bold visionary things were in that 2009 Regional Official Plan that we now take for granted and think little about. Yet, it is good visionary planning that has set Waterloo Region apart from the rest of the province and made us a leader nationally, even globally. Be it the creation of the Blue Box recycling concept, environmentally sensitive ESPA areas that protected the first swamps and wetlands back in the 1970s, and our extraordinary no rural severance policy that has kept our rural farmland intact and thriving, unlike any other region since 1973, we have simply done planning better than most others. This new Wilmot Official Plan now has to be as leading and visionary as our regional official plans, with a fraction of the resources. Everything that has set us apart in the Rock needs to be carried forward in the Wilmot Official Plan, be it our countryside line protecting farmland and clearly guiding development by reducing speculation, our unique no rural severance policy that has helped to ensure Wilmot farms remain intact and amongst the most profitable in all of Canada. When we were not included in the Greenbelt, it fell to the region to ensure that our source water areas, farmland, and natural areas were as protected as the rest of Ontario. Almost all of our environmental protections have been at the regional level, and now, with the loss of regional planning authority, they must be incorporated into this Wilmot plan for our community's quality of life, or our community's quality of life will be threatened, particularly now with the decimation of our conservation authorities. Who else is looking out for our wetlands, our headwaters, our groundwater recharge areas, our farmland, our streams and rivers? All of this must be protected within this Wilmot Official Plan now. Even the idea of Greenbelt expansion to Wilmot needs to be anticipated in this official plan. The most recent Regional Official Plan, approved unanimously by Wilmot Township Council in June 2022 and overwhelmingly by Regional Council in August 2022, built upon the success of previous Regional Official Plans, with a focus on sustainability, housing choice, housing affordability, public transportation, including ION Phase 2 and Phase 3, along with innovative rural transit, farmland protection, clean energy, and environmental protection. We need to ensure that it is this visionary Regional Official Plan and these core themes that comprise the new Wilmot Official Plan, not Queen's Park's desire to destroy our prime farmland with an absurd mega-industrial site so far beyond the scale of our township that its consequences are beyond comprehension. Thank you for all the public engagement opportunities so far. It has been fantastic to see all the high levels of engagement in official plans across Waterloo Region recently. Please continue the outreach and the dialogue. Please do everything possible to ensure a bold, visionary Wilmot Official Plan that incorporates every single thing from the Regional Official Plan and goes even further to create a balanced, resilient, and inclusive future for Wilmot with strong growth management, visionary land use, sustainable communities, transportation, environmental leadership, cultural heritage, and healthy, livable communities. Thank you.
Thank you, and 18 seconds to spare.
Woohoo! Time for questions then.
Yes, are there any questions for Kevin, councillors? Okay, seeing none at this time, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I know you've participated in some of the other engagements, so thank you very much for that.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Hopefully they continue, and we look forward to seeing what we can come up with in the months ahead.
Absolutely. I will now invite up our second and final delegation for this evening, and that is Emily Elior from MHBC Planning. Thank you very much for joining us today, Emily, and you'll have 7 minutes.
Thank you, and good evening. My name is actually Emily Elliott. There was a typo on the agenda. It might have been on our end, though. So good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Emily Elliott. I'm with MHBC Planning, and I'm here this evening on behalf of Kerry Homes with respect to the lands municipally known as 1145 Christner Road in New Hamburg. And I'm here this evening to request that Council consider expansions to the urban area to incorporate additional properties, including our clients' lands. Through reviewing the background reports that were available and the presentation this evening, is our understanding that Council is not considering any boundary expansions through this official plan review and are not planning to undertake an updated land needs assessment. In our view, the official plan does represent a good opportunity to consider additional lands within the settlement area to accommodate opportunities for future residential growth. An updated land needs assessment for the township would provide a more current indication of the total land needs for the municipality, including whether there is a need for additional greenfield land. It would also take into consideration the provincial planning statement requirements that land needs assessment be based on future growth forecasts published by the Minister of Finance, as well as any additional residential lands that may be needed to accommodate the projected employment growth planned for Wilmot. In the case of this property, it does, in our view, represent a logical location for urban development. It has an area of about 40 acres, and it has frontage on Christner Road as well as on Hostetler Road. It's one of the few remaining properties that are outside the urban area but inside the countryside line. The lands are already linked with existing development on Hostetler Road, and allowance has been made for future road connections to complete this portion of the community and connect the lands to existing development. There is water servicing available for these lands in Hostetler Road, and we understand that sanitary services are also available, and through the work that the region is undertaking with respect to sanitary servicing upgrades, there may be capacity for sanitary services as well. And that's related to the planned work related to the Forest Glen wastewater pumping station and the connection to the Morningside trunk sewer. So the subject lands can support development that would further broaden the mix of housing available in this area of the township. And then there are no significant natural heritage features on this property, and there would be no impact on adjacent agricultural uses in terms of MDS. So for these reasons, we respectfully request that Council consider potential for boundary expansions through the official plan review process, and specifically consider this site as it's an appropriate location for such an expansion, as it will be connected with the existing community, and there is a straightforward approach to servicing for future residential development here. So thank you for the opportunity this evening.
Thank you very much, Emily, and apologies on the typo on your last name. Councillors, are there any questions for Emily at this moment? Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair, I appreciate you coming in and advocating on behalf of your client, but I believe we already went through the process when we submitted to the province about not wanting to expand further north or south from our existing countryside line. So I guess my question would all be related to what our future planning, our future wastewater capacity is as well. Is my understanding is we put together a plan that would infill in between Baden and New Hamburg, moving essentially east-west, if you will, and not moving north or south. And that would probably already fulfill what our existing wastewater and water capacity is. So I guess I'm just not quite sure why your client wants to see this expand again, or thought it'd be necessary to bring forward another request.
Through the mayor, I guess this official plan review does represent an opportunity for council to reconsider the boundary of the urban area. So this is another opportunity for our client to make that request.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, seeing none, thank you again very much for joining us, Emily. And we have no further delegations this evening, so I will open it up to council, keeping in mind that this is for information, but if there is feedback either directly from yourselves or residents or other comments that you would like to address that others have made to help influence the next stage of the process and areas that you would like to see highlighted as they go to write the official plan, I would open that. But again, keeping in mind that tonight we're receiving information, but wanted to provide the opportunity for that discussion in case there was any really burning items that people would hope to see reflected in the plan that they haven't yet had a chance to do. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to either acting treasurer or assistant treasurer Okrafka or acting director Martin. I think when we went through some of this process previously, we looked at elevation as one of the considerations, and considering that a pumping station is an expensive piece of infrastructure, we looked at areas that maybe were out of scope, primarily because it would require pumping stations, and the fall wasn't there, the elevation drop wasn't there to have natural flow of wastewater. And so I think we need to, is this going to help inform or have we worked that into what we had put forward to the province as areas that were out of scope because they would require expensive infrastructure?
Yeah, through Mayor Sullivan. So that certainly is something when we provided staff comments, ultimately council comments to the province, we did look at that long-term vision for growth in Baden and New Hamburg, growing the communities together, was funded on that, or founded based on that principle of maximizing gravity servicing existing infrastructure and minimizing the need. Some areas in New Hamburg, while certain areas may be gravity, there would be introduced needs to service surrounding properties that already aren't serviced. So if you wouldn't bring a sewer out to a certain point and then leave a neighborhood not there. In order to service that abutting neighborhood, a pumping station would be required. So there's different pieces that tied into, not specifically the property that the delegation was speaking about, but other areas of New Hamburg that have been contemplated in the past, along Highway 7 and 8, for instance. But certainly with respect to these lands along Christner Road, that was also looked at in terms of the needs for both what formerly was the Mac Farm, now owned by CabCam, as well as these PAB Holdings, now Kerry Homes lands, were looked at in the context of that overall servicing strategy for New Hamburg and Baden. So ultimately, the answer to your question is what was ultimately included in terms of urban area within the provincial approval of Regional Plan Amendment number 6 is reflective of infrastructure optimization, I would say.
And through you, Mayor, just a brief follow-up to that. Does that then reach over, or is it incorporated in what will be our official plan going forward? Is there priority areas that are identified that minimize additional infrastructure requirements, and so you kind of work from the lowest common denominator in infrastructure requirements and then work up the scale to where more cost will be incurred? Or do we assume all of these additions of housing or commercial will have the same infrastructure requirements?
Through Mayor Sullivan. So actually a lot of the infrastructure work that's already occurring with respect to the Baden trunk sewer, servicing through Wilmot Woods, through the employment lands, all of that is setting the stage for those development areas. So in terms of the optimizing infrastructure. We're not anticipating that large new trunk infrastructure would be required to service things from a sanitary perspective. So that then leads to the actual capacity of the plant would be the limiting factor in terms of phasing and staging required. But that focused area of growth, the reason we've kind of been speaking about that kind of infilling between Baden and New Hamburg is it optimizes the existing and now infrastructure that's currently being installed that would facilitate those future developments.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention to Joe and Michelle, I wanted to concur with Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Sadu, and myself that although we understand that there's a need for growth, certainly, but I certainly have heard from a lot of people who have moved here from larger cities because they wanted the rural feel, they wanted the small town. So when you're listening to people, I think that's probably what you're going to hear more and more. But to keep that in mind, you know, that we understand that we need growth. And as a councillor in one of the two locations that will be experiencing that growth, we also want to make sure that it fits in with our community. Thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I guess I first have a question, if I could, to Director Martin. Could you clarify for me, it's my understanding that we've already approved some developments that include 6-story buildings. Am I correct on that?
Yes, through you, Mayor Salonen, you're correct. There are 2 subdivisions that were approved, one in Baden and one in New Hamburg, that provides the opportunity, should the market exist and the developer choose to, would set the stage to accommodate 6-story buildings.
Councillor Martin?
So thank you, Director Martin, through you, Mayor Salonen. Just as a follow-up to that, it's my belief that if we want to protect farmland, we have to go up, not out. I'm concerned about people that live on small properties in the country that are not farmland saying that we need to protect farmland. We have development in the village centers, and it's my belief that we need to go up. And so I hear something different. Councillor Dunstall and I are in the same ward. I guess people talk to whom they think they're going to have an ear that will listen. So I hear people saying that we need to have 6-story buildings, and I think that that's important. And so I wouldn't want our consultants to only hear from councillors that are saying that we shouldn't be having this. We've already approved development that could. You're right, Director Martin. It's a could. It doesn't mean it will. But the improvement is not a word. The approval process has already happened. For that. And in fact there is with Nithview, the 6-story building, that would be another example of a 6-story building. So I want to bring up both sides. I would hesitate to say that people have never heard this, or to put it differently, I would encourage my colleagues to listen to both sides on this. I'm willing to listen to people saying we shouldn't grow, and I do hear that, but I hear other people saying that it's important, if we're going to grow, that we go up.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair, if I could add to that debate, I certainly appreciate where you're coming from, Councillor Martin, and wanting to listen to all perspectives. Don't get me wrong. I think it's interesting, you know, when we talk about the examples of where potential 6-story buildings have been approved, there was a lot of conversation and back and forth, and at least my understanding is willingness on behalf of the developers to look at potentially limiting that, and understanding that that is not necessarily the prevailing thought amongst the existing township. And I would even suggest that given the planning timelines and constraints and rules that exist within this province, you know, some of these decisions are made under duress, where simply you can't make the changes that maybe the town would like to see. I don't necessarily disagree with seeing some increased density. Not everything needs to be a single-family home. I mean, that would be personally my preference, but that's not necessarily everybody's viewpoint. I think that there's maybe a good mix that can be achieved, but wanting to strike that balance of not overwhelming the community with buildings that would simply just look out of place. And I think that's my major concern, is wanting to make sure that we maintain our small town rural character. I mean, think of the tourism and even economic opportunities that we would potentially miss out on say with some of the filming activities that take place in New Hamburg, if all of a sudden you've got 3-story, 2-story, 3-story, 6-story, 8-story buildings, it would just look awkward and out of place. So that's sort of my perspective of where I'm coming from. I don't necessarily disagree that, you know, some density would be good, and that would mean condos, townhomes, stacked townhomes that existing residents that want to age here and live here long term can potentially access. It's just striking that balance.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I appreciate, Councillor Wilkinson, your comments. I remind you, I live in a big old house. I'm preserving a big old house. I'm not trying to tear it down. Some people tried to tear down my house for a parking lot. I'm preserving an old house. So in terms of education, I like to point out I'm happy to be on the Heritage Committee. I think our heritage buildings are important. I also think that how we build is important, and I'm in favor of those comments.
Any other comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, since we're staking our ground out, so to speak, I certainly see the importance of protecting farmland, and I came on this council with that perspective. As a farmer, I see the importance of it as a significant natural heritage that we have, and we need to ensure. And so our planning decisions impact that. And again, we have to look at how we have competing interests when it comes to density and height, and I think again we have to look at how do we get density that it's aesthetically pleasing and meets the needs of the people. And I think that's the piece that we're looking at. And I think when we heard from some developers the impact of having commercial on the first floor, I know one of the things, I live rurally adjacent in close proximity to New Dundee. And guess what? We got a drugstore for the first time, well, at least in my living memory, in New Dundee. And so I had my wife talking to me that we should move our drug needs to the local drugstore and support the small business that came into our community. So I think the idea of supporting local and I think, again, Rory was here earlier, Mannheim and New Dundee aren't going to be the growth centers of this township. I think we all know that. In your ward, St. Agatha isn't, and I see some comments about Petersburg. They have neither, at this point, community water or sewage, wastewater. So growth will occur in Baden and New Hamburg, and how we look forward in the next 50 years to make sure it's crafted in a way that is pleasing but meets the needs of our community is the task that sits before us. So,
Councillor Dunstall.
I concur with Councillor Cressman, and I just wanted to, one of the best things about having two people in New Hamburg is that we represent different people and different views, and I just want to assure everyone here that we will not be duking it out in the parking lot. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will say well said to Councillor Cressman. A few points I wanted to make sure I got across because they were comments that I heard from my residents in Ward 2 in particular, and I would agree with what was just said, and that's we're not going to see development in the rural settlements just simply because there's no infrastructure there, and you know that's the way those places are intended to stay. So I would like to see that. I thought it was very interesting to see the mere suggestion that Petersburg should be developed. I don't think that that's going to happen, and I don't think I'll ever see it in my lifetime. So hopefully that will stay that way. But I would say just a few comments. If I'm adding feedback here, it's maintain the countryside line and settlement boundaries in order to protect farmland and make sure that we continue to grow as planned in between Baden and New Hamburg. Service to our current capacity, and I would point everyone to look at our Region of Waterloo wastewater capacity report, and perhaps need to revise that as well to take into account what existing development for industrial purposes we've already planned for as well, because that number is likely to be much lower. And then I've already said, I think, everything I need to discuss regarding higher densities, but rather just make sure that we're doing it appropriately. So that would be my feedback at this point, and look forward to seeing more.
Any other comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Likely a comment on environmental impact. I think I personally see that every day when I look out at what used to be 25 acres of cedar swamp, and it's all dead and lying over because of the impact of the wells in proximity to Mannheim. And that was my father's fight. He got compensation from the region because of drying a spring-fed creek up, and the fact that he used to stock it and have the teenage neighbors come in and fly fish in that stream. And it is the odd time there's water in it, but not very often. And so there is an environmental impact, and how we minimize that impact and how we protect wetlands and significant features is important. And I know, Kevin, you're very passionate. I don't have your words or your speed of delivery to get a half-an-hour presentation in 7 minutes, but I think there's truth in a number of these areas. And so how do we as council balance those competing interests, people who want to come and live in our township, and we need growth, we need to see that happening, but how do we manage that appropriately and minimize the impact on the environment around us, I think is where we have to land.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I will just close out. One, thank you very much to our consultants and to our staff who have all worked on getting us to this point. As you do go ahead to continue, I think one thing that I would say, to throw my 2 cents in on the building heights, I would just like to see that the official plan doesn't lock the community in the future into not having a choice over what is done. So in some scenarios, I have been persuaded that the up to 6-story in Greenfield is justifiable. Part of that, honestly, is because of the way that the developers have presented it and have been working with the communities, and also part of it is it's not in an existing neighborhood. So those moving in there would know that. I would just not want to see our official plan commit a future council and community members into having to go forward with something and not have that flexibility. And I think the other thing I would say is just a reminder to the community. Thank you to everyone who came out. Thank you to everyone who's contributed up to this point. Please do remain engaged. And you can do that by reaching out to anyone on council. Also, the information that was shared on the Engage Waterloo Region page, and to our staff, of course, as this continues to be setting up for the next decades how we're growing as a community, and that's really important. So please do continue to stay engaged. And the one other ask I would have for staff and for our consultants is, in addition to kind of the budgetary elements that I had mentioned, if we could also overlay understanding that now the region no longer has a planning function, but they are commenting also that they still own some of the resources that dictate how we grow. having some sort of discussion there. I'm even thinking when we talk about roads and some of our intersections, I see one gentleman in particular, I know we've had many conversations about an intersection that's quite dangerous, that's regionally owned in our community and continues to see increased traffic. And we're really struggling with getting the region on board with seeing and recognizing that. So if there could be some sort of discussion that, you know, the region's plans also align with where and how we're planning on growing, and having these documents certainly would help me advocate to at the regional level where I'm just one voice, but if we have the whole township document. So I would just kind of ask for that overlay, which I imagine you guys are already consulting with them, but would be remiss without mentioning it. So that would be kind of my summary comments, other than thank you, and we look forward to the next steps of this process. And Councillor Wilkinson has another piece.
Through the chair, can we simply clarify, there was mention of a December meeting, just maybe looking for a little more clarity on what exactly that will be and what the forum will look like? Or is it a December update? Was I incorrect in that?
Director Martin?
Yeah, there was timelines for different reporting. There isn't a meeting scheduled in December. So this was, yeah.
It's possible. Go ahead.
It's through the chair. I'm just trying to remember back to the commentary that Mr. Nethery was giving. The next update, I know that there was a silent period mentioned that we're looking at March is really the next sort of level of engagement, but did you not mention that there would be sort of an update or additional information coming forward in the coming months?
I just think, Mr. Nethery can speak to it, but it's the communication with schools that he has meetings with with schools. I've forgotten about that.
I still want credit for the cardio.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? That did actually remind me of one other comment in relation to the school boards. I think that's fantastic that you're engaging with our youth. Could we also properly engage with their planning departments? Because I grew up in a time where our school board chose to close 3 public schools to open 1, and then that turned into a second one by the time I graduated high school. Really poor planning on their part. If we can do our best to feed into them, and I know in that scenario, township staff were telling them what the actual numbers were going to be, and they chose not to acknowledge, but if we could really hit that home so that does not become another future problem. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I did see one of our people in the gallery that had her hand up, so I'm not sure if she wants to speak.
We would have to actually suspend our bylaw and rules, but I would suggest that you're more than happy to speak to us after, and we can certainly feed that into the process. But for the public meeting rules, it would require completely waiving procedural bylaw. Okay. So.
What I was expecting to see here tonight, it says that.
Okay. We'll follow up after, because again, I can't, yes, thank you. So council, again, this is an information session, or information item. So I'd be looking for those to vote in favor to receive for information. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. I have no announcements for this evening. Did any councillors have announcements? Okay, seeing none. We have our confirmatory bylaw to be moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor, that carries unanimously. And for business arising from closed, I have a conflict of interest, so I will pass it over to Councillor Cressman.
Sorry, turned my mic on. I will now ask the Deputy Clerk to read the recommendation that came out of closed.
Thank you, Councillor Cressman. The recommendation that is in front of Council reads as follows. The Council appoints the following individuals to the Prime Minister's Path Community Steering Committee. Those names are Donald Bourgeois, Dave Caputo, John English, Lee Fitzpatrick, Steve Kalflesh, Andrew Kipp, Pat Mighton, Allison Roger, and Carolyn Salonen, and that the committee be supported by the following individuals who will act as advisors that provide guidance as needed but will not have voting privileges at committee meetings. Those are Ruth Abernathy, Benny Skinner, and JDM Stewart.
I would like to thank, on behalf of council, all those who applied. Wasn't a necessarily easy decision, and we thank each one who brought their name forward and went through the application process. We appreciated the willingness to become engaged. So we've heard the clerk make the announcement of the, so I'm seeking a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. I got to remember your names now. This is a big job. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously, noting the abstention of the mayor. And I turn it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I would just be looking for an adjournment. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Stu. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Have a great evening.